Hey guys, how are you all doing? Let's do the important thing first. Happy New Year. I hope that you've had a wonderful restive, oh my god, I think I just mixed restful and festive and created restive. If you've had a restive holiday period and that you are fully into the swing of the new year. I'm a big sucker for like a whole like new year fresh start type thing. Never a new year, new me, because I'm always the same chaotic individual, but I love the vibes of a fresh start. So happy new year 2022. Glad to see you go. The wickedness you did was enough. Please never come back. Anyway, I hope that you've all had a lovely time. I have a few housekeeping bits from last year to do, namely this video, because I thought I was going to get this video up for the 31st. It didn't happen that way, but life just sometimes gets in the way, you know? And so I do have this video to finish. Hope that's okay with you guys, and I hope that it's not too late. This is my best books of 2022. I love these videos. I've consumed so many of these videos over the past kind of like 2 weeks, and so I thought it was time that I finally put my 2 penneth in it, because I know that's what you were waiting for. And so I thought I'd come at you guys with my top 8 books that I read this year. Weird number, I know, but that is because 2022 was an interesting reading year for me. I mentioned this before. I think I had a good reading year in the sense that I don't think I read anything terrible. Well, I didn't read very many things that were terrible, but I also didn't equally read that many things that were like fantastic. And so like it was like quite middle groundish for me. And so 8 felt like the number I could think of without having to force anything for like a round number. And so I'm coming at you with 8 of the best books that I read this year. There is a mix of fiction and non-fiction, because I think my non-fiction reading year was significantly better than my fiction reading year. And so that is where we're at. I hope that you enjoy this video. I hope that, like, you know, maybe you can get some ideas of books to read, or if you've read any of these books, let me know, because I'd be really interested in your thoughts and opinions. So let's do that first. Let's just do that. Okay, so I have a mix of books. I've got books that I can physically show you, and then I've got books that I'll just be like doing like a little thing of, mainly because like some of these books are out in the world doing the rounds with friends and stuff like that, because I'm one of those people that if I love a book, I must force everybody I know to read it. And so some of those books are out there, and some of them I listened to or read digitally. So that is the mix. I'm going to start with the books that I physically have to show you, just for like editing flow, no other reason. So let's do that. The first book that I've got to show you is probably my favorite book that I read all year, a book that I've definitely talked about, a book that, like, if you follow me on like Instagram and stuff like that, I've definitely mentioned there, and so it makes sense that I should talk about this book first. And it's a non-fiction book. It is Experiments in Imagining Otherwise by Lola Olufemi. This book was one of the books that made their way in to kind of like my decolonial feminist praxis reading guide. It's not a guide, it's just books that like I personally recommend to people when talking about like black feminist thought. This book made its way into it this year, which is very high accolade. But Lola Olufemi is a feminist writer, theorist, thinker, and they've written this book called Experiments in Imagining Otherwise, which is just full of like short bursts of prose, poetry, like brain dumps, like little mini essays and stuff like that, about kind of like how we imagine a future beyond what we know, how we imagine otherwise. This book is small, it's powerful, it's passion politics to its core, and it's just full of radical and revolutionary love. I think Lola Olufemi is a wonderful writer. They are, I don't know, like they're just what I wish I sounded like when I write or talk about feminism. And so this book is literally just amazing. I have one of my favorite quotes written down, and it's, "I feel embarrassed when I say feminism and people do not think of revolution in service of everyday..." Try again. "I feel embarrassed when I say feminism and people do not think revolution in service of every living thing. I think I will spend my whole life trying to rectify that." And this book is just full of just like more wonderful like tidbits. That sounds really like I feel like that like diminishes what's in this book, but it's small, it's powerful, and if you are looking for like quick black feminist thought, this is where to get it from. Okay, so the next book that I have that was one of my favourites this year is this one, and it is The Sex Lives of African Women by Nana Darkoa Sakiyama. This book is a collection of short stories, however, like non-fiction, short segments actually not even that short, but just stories of like various women living on and off the continent of Africa, talking and exploring about like things like sexuality, desires, all these kinds of things. This, to me, how I phrase it to some people is not to put women against women, but this is what I imagine Lisa Taddeo thought she was writing when she wrote Through Owen. And if you know me, you know that I'm so anti that book, but this book felt like a more comprehensive look at desire and women. It explores like the relationships and also like personal desires of African women, and I think it makes a wonderful addition to writings on Africa and the diaspora. The collection is so layered and multifaceted and really explores these women in quite a holistic way, which I really enjoyed. It's also very deeply affirming. I don't know, like, it's just one of those books that I think I will come to again and again. I'm actually planning like a proper reread of this. So I'm gonna get some tabs. I'm gonna like become like one of those like book people that like tab these books. This is a book that I think I really want to like properly revisit as part of just my own personal like education and stuff like that. So this book, really recommend it. If you're not into kind of like non-fiction, especially like oral history-ish type non-fiction, you might not enjoy this, but if you are and that sounds like something really up your street, I'd really recommend it. Okay, and then the last physical book that I have to show you is one that I actually didn't even read physically. I then just went and bought it physically, and it is this one, which is I'm Glad My Mum Died. Oh my god, I just noticed that like these were all non-fiction. I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is a book that came out this year, and I feel like everybody was talking about it for a while. I definitely missed kind of like the bandwagon of discourse on this book, but I did document me reading it over on my Instagram stories because it just had me in a chokehold. I listened to this when it first came out and I really enjoyed it. This book basically follows Jeanette McCurdy, who is a child star from things like iCarly and Sam and Cat. It basically talks about like her rise into acting, her relationship with her mother, and how when her mum died she started unpacking that like actually probably had been quite an abusive relationship that had led her to things like eating disorders, as well as kind of like harmful romantic relationships and a variety of other things. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was like, the title is very provocative, but like the content is just very like heart-wrenching, and it just really makes you like put yourself into this like very young girl's shoes. I think I don't know the experience of reading it physically, but the audiobook narration I really enjoyed because it is narrated by Jeanette McCurdy herself, and so like yeah, I really liked that. These are very short chapters as well, and they're very like conversational in tone. They're not like, it's not a deep exploration on like things like bulimia or anything. It's just like, hey guys, this is my life. And it kind of feels like she wrote it how you would tell it to your friends. Do you know when you're like talking about like something really tragic and traumatic to friends, but you're like, haha, let's laugh about it. Had that kind of tone to it, and I really enjoyed this book. So if you've not read it, you somehow like didn't read this book when everybody on the internet was talking about it, would really recommend reading it. Okay, I feel like I'm already on a roll with the non-fiction, so I'll just do my last non-fiction book I have, because I only have one other, and it is The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay. This is a book that I listened to earlier on towards kind of the beginning half of the year, and it's a book that talks about the current state of transgender rights, politics, and discourse, specifically within a UK context, but also like it can be extrapolated out. This is a book that was on my radar from like 2021, and I didn't get around to it in 2021, so I knew I had to get around to it in 2022. I consider myself to be somebody that's an ally, and I think allyship is all about kind of like doing the work and like reading more. And like there were a lot of times in the book where I was like damn, what? In terms of like, I can't imagine that like my education, like my personal education, had missed that while I was like doing the reading and doing the work. And so this was one of those books that like definitely challenges you to like think more. It's a really good intro to like middle ground of like trans politics, as well as like just generally trans people living and existing. Really enjoyed it, really loved it. It spurred me to do more reading around kind of like trans people, so like that's one of my like 2023 aims. I've got a few books that are like ones that I have and have had for a few years, all came out last year, that I think would like continue my education a little bit better. But if you're looking for like a really good introduction to kind of like the discourse surrounding trans lives and like why it's important that like you're so educated, or like why it's important that like your allyship shows up, then The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay is a fantastic place to start with all of that. So that is all of my non-fiction books. That is all of my non-fiction books. Let's talk about my fiction books that I loved this year. And the first one is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle. Hello? I just got a phone call, so it cut off my mic, and now I've got no idea where I was, what I was doing, etc. Do you know when you just like leaves you a bit like, ooh, Anyway, hoping that this footage survives, because now I'm just like a bit like, I'm so scatterbrained. But I was about to start my fiction book, and I had started my fiction book. I talked about Nora Goes Off Script. Okay, let's go. So rewind the track a little bit, DJ. Favorite non-fiction books, favorite fiction books of the year. First one is Nora Goes Off Script. Can't remember who it's by now. Again, it's really frazzled me, that phone call. But this was a book that I read towards the beginning of the year. I was in a reading slump because I read a couple of books that I just really didn't enjoy, and it just like, it dudded me. And so I read this book as a way to try and undo that reading slump, and it worked. This book follows Nora, who is in her 40s, recently divorced, and is trying to figure out how to make an income now that she's divorced. And so she writes this book gets picked up, or a script. No, she's not a book writer, she's a script writer. Writes a script, gets picked up, and it becomes like a thing that like the highest paid actor, we're not selling actors, highest paid actor in Hollywood gets picked to star in it, and he comes to live in this house that Nora still lives in, because that's where the script is going to be set, the movie is going to be set. There's like an RV outside, and it just follows them falling in love, the complications and miscommunications. This book, how I describe this book, it was so mundane. Like, it was just very like, apart from the fact it's a celebrity, it was very mundane. But mundane in a good way. Mundane in a, we don't need every story to be radical, or like, bleh. Like, boring stories also matter. And like, not boring as in like, I think that the book was boring, but like, it was just like the rigmarole of like love and miscommunication and everything, and I love those kinds of books. This book definitely leans more romance than it does women's fiction, even though it's like, I think it's being publicized as women's fiction, but I really enjoyed it. I think it did like a really good job of being like, oh, what a sweet read, or like, oh, like what a relatable read, apart from the fact that I'm not dating a celebrity actor. However, if Chris Evans wants to call me, he can call me. That's all I'm saying. Okay, moving on to the next book, which is Honey and Spice by Bolly Babalola. This is a book that was super anticipated for me. As soon as I heard that Bolly was coming out with a book, I was like, I have to read it. Like a novel, I have to read it. That's the same person that wrote Love and Colour, a short story collection, a couple of years ago. Really enjoyed that, and so this book was, this book follows Kiki, who is in her early 20s, a university student, a little bit like has a bit of a tainted view on like love and relationships, very much so like set in like almost like a contemporary UK setting of like fuckboys and like dating and situationships and all of those kinds of things, especially things that are like super prevalent in your like early 20s. So this book explores all of those things in a romantic setting, and so there's this new guy that comes in, and she's like, stay away from him, and then they start a fake dating kind of situation to kind of like, they both have like things that they both want. This book, I don't think, oh, that's gonna be mean, I don't think this book is gonna age well. I think it's a very like specific time moment type of book, because there's a lot of pop culture references, a lot of like London slang is used, a lot of very much like time, place, cultural ins, and so I don't know if this book is gonna withstand the test of time. But for this time, where I'm at here, I loved this book. I think this book was just like really nice, really feel good. It made me laugh, it made me kiki. I was like, damn, this is so true. This right here, this is so true. And I just liked it. I also liked like the chemistry between Kiki and I think his name is Malcolm, can't remember. But like, I loved their chemistry, I loved their banter, I loved their interaction. I think this book was just so indicative of like what it is like to be in your early 20s, a black woman and dating. It was a very interesting read and I really enjoyed it. Would recommend it to you. However, if you're not a big fan of like current pop culture references, if you want your books to kind of like take you out of things, I don't think this is the book for you, because it definitely does a lot of like, haha, we're gonna run a commentary on dating right now in this specific time frame. Also, if you are a girl from maybe like South London, a black woman from South London, this book could, trigger warning, because it's a little bit too accurate. But I'm not from South London. I can be like, haha. Anyway, while we're on the topic of black women in London, this could be a good time to talk about my other favourite book of the year, which was Assembly by Natasha Brown. This is a book that I read in like March time, I want to say. And I really enjoyed it. This is a very short, poetic book exploring a woman who lives in London, and she is grappling with her mortality after getting some news, and she is basically exploring the measures of success that she used for her life, what it's like to be in like corporate London as a black woman, what it's like to be dating as a black woman, like what it's like to like be talking to your parents who have this like view of success, or like to be molded in this way, like viewing success in a specific way. I really enjoyed this book. I think it was a really interesting like foray into kind of like the expectations and growing up as a black woman and what success means, and how we're taught to frame success, or like accomplishments, happiness, love, etc., all those things. So I really enjoyed this book, thought it was really fascinating. And it's super quick as well, like if you're just looking for something super quick to read. I read this in like a day, and it was just one of those books that like once I picked it up, I sat down in a little cozy nook and I was blitzing through it. So I really recommend it if you're looking for just like a short book that's still like really mighty, powerful. That Shakespeare quote, though she be tiny, though she be small, she be mighty. That's what I describe this book as, basically. Okay, and then finally we've got The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw. This is a short story collection, which I got into this year. I read quite a few short story collections, which is not really a thing that I would usually do. But I read a few this year and I loved this one. This one is a collection of short stories based in kind of like Southern America, especially like within Baptist churches type of vibes, and it's like 9 short stories that look at like these women who are like navigating both growing up in these churches, but also kind of like their own personal lives and how those things interact, especially in like the South of America. I really enjoyed this. I think there was some really good imagery used in this book, especially around like food. Like the descriptions of food were phenomenal in this book, especially kind of like the peach cobbler. Was it peach cobbler? The peach pie, peach cobbler, peach thing. You know what I mean if you've read this book. I think that was like a really interesting like narrative to weave into it, because I do know that like food is super big within like Southern, I mean, so I feel like food is super big within black communities anyway, but like food is obviously like such a huge part of like Southern American black culture. And so I just really loved this book. I think there are a lot of like really important themes that are highlighted, like what it's like to grow up black and female in these communities, as well as kind of like the importance of like the judging and like how you navigate all those things. I thought this book was just phenomenal from Deesha Philyaw, and if you are looking for a short story collection, if you're looking for things like that to read, I would super recommend this one. I'm about to run out of space. We've shifted a little bit because I ran out of space on this SD card. This video has honestly been just like one of the most chaotic videos I've ever filmed, and I literally can't stress that to you guys. Like, I'm so stressed right now. But those are all the favourite books that I had, my best books of 2022, all 8 of them. I'm hoping this year is like a far like more like 5-star reading year, but I'm not putting any pressure on myself. If you are interested in my reading aims and intentions for the year, it's basically that I want to continue to read more non-fiction, because my split is still really bad for non-fiction. I think it's like 70-30, and I'm trying to get to like 60-40 minimum. I want to read more books on my shelf. I've got quite a few books that I have that I've honestly just been acting as decoration, and so I want to like really read some of those books so I can like, you know, feel no guilt about buying new ones, because I'm like, oh well, I've already read every book I own. Another intention for me this year is to read more LGBT plus books and authors, because I don't think I do a very good job of that either. Like I try, but I think I want to be like more intentional about it. And then there's obviously like always like lots of like tidbits. I'm aiming for 52 books this year. I always aim for 52 books, which is like 1 book a week. If I do more, amazing. If I don't do more, also no pressure. But those are kind of my final thoughts. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you have a good like rest of your week and hopefully a good year. Like, let's set the intention that way, and I will be back at you very soon, hopefully with a anticipated releases of 2023 video. Cross our fingers, cross them. Okay, I will see you guys very, very soon.